And welcome. Raising Your Game today. I'm David Levin. This is our Friday episode, so we're talking about the inner game of life. Tuesdays are for the mental game of sports and competition. Fridays are for the rest of our lives. So how are you feeling this week? I am mostly back to normal. I know I said that last week, but sometimes I think I'm all the way back, and then there are other moments where I feel like I'm not quite there. It's that weird in-between place where you have, vague symptoms. I'm a little sniffly, a little tired, lungs are a little heavy. But is that leftover cold or allergies or just being old? I don't know. I had a good full night of pickleball last night. That's a good sign, but still not quite 100%. Let's call it 90% and say it could be a whole lot worse. So lots to talk about this week. Oh my goodness. Trump's insane Gaza comments, Elon Musk running amok through the government, running a Musk. More crazy gems from the White House and Republicans. The famous Marshawn Lynch technique revisited. Thoughts on evaluating expert information, what to do with that. Our challenge of the week and some more recommendations. All right, we'll start with ups and downs. So what gave me a lift this week and what things are pulling me down? The first great up happened just last night. I got an email from the father of one of my private coaching clients. He's a young ski racer. I had sent him a note saying things seem to be going well. I know he's not, still seeing the results he's hoping for, but his attitude's great. Things are looking good. I hope things will come together soon. He wrote back saying, I guess you haven't heard, and he included a picture of his son in the center of the winner's podium from last week's race. He won his latest competition. That was so exciting. I have really enjoyed working with this young man. I want to say young man, but he's 13. That's younger than I normally work with, but he's just remarkably mature for his age. It's been really great, and I could not be more excited and happy for him. That was a beautiful thing. Lift me up pretty good. Another one, much smaller, I finished a new song, or the first reworking of an old song. I talked about that project last week. Pretty happy with it. Felt pretty good, though also still a bit of a roller coaster, as I also mentioned last week. And it really does suck up so much time. I'll pick it up. One little idea to work on could easily take an hour to put in there. So that can really get away from you. But still, good overall. We had a big fundraiser for our daughter's school this last week. It's a big meal in the hall of their school, like 90 people in there, one huge long table. And the school is in a classic old building, which is just very echoey. Last year, it was hard for people to hear each other over the noise, like they got hoarse from shouting to hear each other. So this year, some parents got together, me included, and put up a bunch of sound panels using a design I'd used some years ago and some materials I still had in the garage. It was a big project, and we were worried it wouldn't actually make much difference because, again, it's such a perfect space for being echoey. But it made a huge difference, which felt really great. So that was nice, too. And it's just a lovely event in general. It was nice to be part of that, too. The downside of the event is that Margaret, my wife, is a coordinator, and they really transformed the whole space into a warm, lovely environment, as you can imagine. And most of the things they use to do that come from our house. So we had a ton of things to break down and pack up and move over there. I joked that we should have used a moving company, and it wasn't that far from the truth. And that was not great for me. I get fussy with disruptions like that. Also, the school is up a couple of long flights of stairs, and we didn't have as much help as we needed loading out. Many, many trips up and down those stairs. My legs are pretty tapped out on Sunday. One other lovely thing, though. We had piled up all the stuff in our driveway when we got back home. Margaret and I had not brought it in the house yet. We were taking a little break. Our neighbors noticed the pile and thought, oh, that's a lot of stuff. So they just came over and helped us load it in, which was actually a huge help. That was really so lovely and appreciated. Made me very happy. For my downs, the disruption and work of that was definitely one of them. But the big one, no surprise, is all the crazy Trump stuff again. We'll talk more later, but the Gaza thing especially got me. Between that and the Elon stuff, the anti-trans and the DEI stuff, it's just getting to be a lot. I imagine you're feeling the same. I have not restarted my No News Till 9 plan yet, and I'm not honestly sure it would help that much. These things would bum me out whenever I heard about them. Anyway, that's ups and downs for this week. Next up, top stories. The big story this week has to be Trump's absolutely insane comments on Gaza. I assume you heard about this. But he suggested, and it seems like he really means it, that we, the U.S., would first remove all the people from Gaza, expel 1.8 million people from their homeland, I assume forcibly, not likely they want to leave on their own, and then we would take ownership of their land, just take it, and then redevelop it into some sort of beach paradise. On the one hand, this is so insane and potentially explosive in the region and the world that I literally can't get my head around it. On the other hand, it's not likely to be even remotely possible ever, and there are other, actually dangerous things he's doing right now, so focusing on it is probably a distraction that might even help him. But if you don't pay attention and push back, doesn't he just continue and turn it into something even worse? It's a question. So anyway, for now, let me just point out a few things that make this so dumb and dangerous, and then we'll move on. First, clearing out the Palestinians from Gaza is ethnic cleansing. By definition, it's a war crime. It's an element of genocide. We went to war in Bosnia in the 90s to stop this from happening there. To now have the United States of America adopt this as our official policy is beyond belief. You cannot calculate the damage that will do to the international order, let alone that it's just simply wrong in every way. Next, Trump wants the U.S. to take the land and develop it, and he has this grand vision for this beautiful new peaceful place in the Middle East. When we invaded Iraq and toppled Saddam Hussein, that was also based on a grand vision. Self-evident, the neocons all said, that a beautiful new democracy would emerge there and transform the entire region. We know how that worked out. We're still paying the price for that epic mistake. This would be many times worse. The fate and treatment of the Palestinians by Israel has been the core of the Middle East conflict from the beginning. And the idea to drive them out and take the land has only been suggested by the most extreme elements in Israel. No one has taken that seriously as an actual solution. It's outrageous and cruel and unthinkable. Do we really think that having us do that now instead is not going to just make everything worse and bring all that rage and fury from the Muslim world directly down on us, and rightfully so? I use the word explosive for this, and I mean it pretty literally. And then add to that what it does to our reputation and the world order. It's just beyond belief. Now again, it's not going to happen. I guess I am confident of that. But that doesn't mean Trump's idiotic statements aren't already doing real damage all over the world, because they absolutely are. But they're also keeping us from focusing on the other bad things they're doing. Trump's 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada that he pulled at the last minute, how dumb and damaging those were. Canadians booing our national anthem. Old news now, and that was a week ago. The thing I'm actually most freaked out about right now is all the stuff Elon Musk is doing. Again, you can't even think clearly about it because it's so unimaginable. Private citizen, richest man in the world, right-wing crazy, it looks like, Nazi salute, all that, has full access to the software systems of our biggest government agencies. Why is he allowed to do that in the first place? How is it even possible? And what is he actually doing? Imagine if China or Russia had that kind of access. What would they give for that kind of access? And what would they do with it? How long would it take to do real lasting damage? I imagine just a few minutes. Are we sure where his loyalties lie? I'm not. He has a lot of business in China. What code could he be putting in there? What the hell is happening? And how will we ever know the full story of what they're doing? Oh, it just blows your mind. The news that's most heartbreaking, probably, is shutting down USAID. I cannot imagine why they think this is a good idea. This program helps millions of people all over the world, and the people most in need, Sudan, Ukraine, Thailand. It provides food, water, medicine, basic health care. It's pennies on the dollar of value returned, and amazing positive PR for us. We help people. We care. We're mostly the good guys. But when we then turn around and say, well, actually, never mind. I guess you're on your own now. All that goes away. And for what reason? To what end? It's so cruel and short-sighted. And by the way, also very bad for U.S. farmers who grow most of that food. But what do you think happens long-term? How does it affect our security when the rest of the world no longer looks up to us, when they see us as a bully and a danger rather than a friend? Also, can you think of someone else, maybe some other countries who wish they had more friends in the world and would love a chance to use their wealth to build those friendships? I bet you can. This horrendous policy is also a huge gift to China and Russia, our main adversaries. The other heartbreaking top story for me is the systematic erasing of trans people. I mean, literally erasing them. The government no longer recognizes them for who they are. So this means insane things like they're removing the T and Q from LGBTQ references in government documents. Now it's just LGB. Think about that. Federal employees are literally not allowed to acknowledge that trans people exist anymore. Is that not discrimination on the basis of gender? But it's our official policy now. And think of all those people. How must they be feeling? Again, it's just so cruel and petty and wrong. And now here's a list of other notable, but maybe not top stories. Darren Beatty, if I'm saying that right, Beatty, in the new State Department, Diplomacy and Public Affairs, he was quoted as saying, check this out, quote, "Competent white men have to be in charge in order for things to work," end quote. Competent white men have to be in charge in order for things to work. White supremacist, straight up, top job in the State Department. Pam Bondi, new Attorney General. Thank you, Senate Republicans. One of her first acts is to direct prosecutors to criminally investigate private companies that have DEI programs. What's the crime? What about the First Amendment? And what is the obsession with DEI in the first place? I mean, I might not think it's a great idea all the time. It could certainly get off on the wrong track. But they're acting like it's the main existential threat to our country. It's just crazy. Sean Duffy, the new Secretary of Transportation, he says, no more DEI here. We're all about meritocracy now. But then he says, and this is for real, we will give hiring preference to people from communities with higher than average birth rates. Birth rates? What does that have to do with merit for the job? Donald Trump, classic idiot Trump move, opens dams in Northern California in response to the LA fires, which are, of course, long since out. Talks like he's finally bringing common sense to the situation and solving the water problem down there for good. Yay for me. When in fact, the water would never go to LA for one thing. It stays up in the north. Instead, it's what farmers rely on in that area during the dry season, and now it's going to be gone. Helps no one, hurts farmers. Genius. Last one, Trump will be attending the Super Bowl this weekend. First president ever to do that. Okay. What does the NFL do to prepare? They remove the message in the end zone that says, end racism. So I guess you don't have to see it when he's there. Is he really against ending racism? He might be. Anyway, on and on it goes. On the good news front, the resistance, the pushback, Democrats are starting to get rolling, holding up the Senate, protests starting to come together, tons of legal challenges all across the country. Hopefully those will at least slow things down. This one's fun. The Proud Boys, we know who they are, right? The racist, violent insurrectionists. Pardoned by Trump, by the way. Bound to be more trouble going forward. They had vandalized a black church in D.C. some time ago. A court this week gave the church legal ownership and rights to the name, the Proud Boys. So they can't use it anymore. They can't use it. They can't sell merch with it, anything. That's poetic. I also want to point out a great podcast episode this week from Ezra Klein, from the Ezra Klein Show from the New York Times. The piece was called Don't Believe Him, and I was genuinely comforted by it. So smart and thoughtful and a helpful perspective, and we can all use things we're comforted by right now, so I highly recommend you give that a listen. I'll put a link in the notes, but you could search on Ezra, Don't Believe Him, and find it that way too, I'm sure. For our Crazy of the Week, just one item, sort of a new conspiracy theory, I guess. Let me read this to you. Quote, the entire modern left is just smoke and mirrors. There's no left-wing voter base. All the elections are rigged and fake. All liberal media outlets have no audience and are kept alive by USAID funding. So I guess by now we know why they're upset about USAID. Of course, none of that's true. But apparently, you and I don't actually exist. Our votes weren't cast. They were fake. Viewership numbers are faked. It's all a government plot. Never mind that USAID was also there when Trump was elected the first time. And when Kamala lost, you might think they would tip things their way if they were controlling everything. And how did I discover this shocking revelation? Elon Musk retweeted the claim with the comment, yes, in all caps. Did I mention crazy? All right, that's top stories this week. It's a lot. I hope you're hanging in there. Oh, my goodness. Next up, Inner Game Gold. Last week, we talked about the Leonardo da Vinci quote from the Raise Your Inner Game book. The height of a person's success is gauged by their self-mastery. And we did that as a reminder that self-mastery is the key to basically everything we want in our lives, and that is going to be needed more than ever with all the crazy that's coming. And we got a good reminder of that, as if we needed it, in this week's news. This week, I want to bring it back to the practical and revisit our famous Marshawn Lynch technique. The technique is you look in the mirror and you ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be today? And you work on being that person. This is a surprisingly powerful thing to do at any time. Marshawn is one of the all-time great football running backs, helped him play at that level. But it's also super relevant for right now, dealing with everything that's coming and going on. The danger of crazy times is that it pulls us down with it. It turns us into lesser versions of ourselves and people we don't want to be. It's our natural response to stress and pressure. So this practice, on a regular basis, putting attention on how you're being and laying a marker for how you want to be, is a great protector of your best self. It helps you notice when you're slipping and gives you extra strength to keep it from happening. There's more to do on both those fronts. Of course, you want to train your inner skills to deal with all that, but this is a great tool to have in your toolkit. So that's our gold for this week, the Marshawn Lynch technique. Look in the mirror, ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be today? Next up, raise your outer game. This week, I want to talk again about how to evaluate the information we hear in the media. How should we hold the things we hear, especially things that aren't super clear, like nutrition and social science? I talked about this before, but it's come up again for me this week. I read a great article recently in The Atlantic called The Myth of a Loneliness Epidemic. And the title jumped out at me because I was pretty sure we have an actual loneliness epidemic in our country and in the world, right? I mean, you've heard that too. It sort of makes sense. You hear about more and more so-called deaths of despair, suicide, drug overdose. Our Surgeon General has talked about it. I've heard studies that supported it. The World Health Organization declared it's a pressing public health concern. The UK and Japan appointed loneliness ministers. That all sounds pretty real, right? Well, it turns out maybe not. Historically, maybe not so different now. The studies were not great. It's super hard to be clear in survey questions what people are actually describing when they say lonely. One very interesting specific, people's survey responses after the JFK assassination in 1963, they said they were more lonely than before when, of course, nothing had changed in their social situation. So it's very possible that people will describe a general sadness or depression or just the blues as being lonely because, they kind of go together. Anyway, the article is fascinating on its own. I recommend checking that out. But the bigger question, again, was what do you do with information that's presented as fact? You want to be able to believe it when it's from a credible source. You have to be able to believe something and trust someone. You need assumptions in order to do anything. At the same time, things do change, right? We learn, we improve, we evolve new understandings, and we want that to be true and supported as well. So I think the wrong reaction is to just not trust anything. And a lot of people are there now. And that is an intentional goal of authoritarians, right? It's a known tactic. You put out a ton of crap, you question facts, you put up alternate facts, until finally people start to think that nothing can be known for sure, and now you can get away with whatever you want. That's super dangerous. So I guess the only place to land with this is to accept things, again, from trusted sources, but hold them lightly. Yes, I believe this now. This makes sense to me. I'm also open to changing my mind if new information comes in. This is actually an interesting topic. I think it was Sam Harris when I first heard this, but on the subject of whether someone is being reasonable versus being an ideologue, the question to ask them is there some piece of information that could change your mind on this? Could anything happen that would make you change your position? So, for example, an atheist, if you asked, is there anything that could convince you that God exists? And they say, well, I guess if he or she appeared to me, or my dad came back and told me heaven was real, I guess that might do it. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible. I'd change my mind. That's a reasonable person with an open mind. That's what you want to be. But if they say, nope, nothing can change my mind on that. I absolutely believe this, no matter what evidence there might be against it. That is obviously not being reasonable. That's a closed mind. And you can't actually reason with people with a position like that. Any meaningful conversation is impossible on that topic. And it's especially fascinating to hear people presented with evidence that contradicts their belief. They just reject it. I don't believe that. You see that a lot in Trumpistan. I don't believe he said that. I don't believe he did that. He would never. That's fake news. Even though it's so clear and obvious that he did. Anyway, that is Raise Your Outer Game for this week. How should we hold information that's presented as being true? And the suggestion is believe it from trusted sources, comfortably act on it, but also be open to new evidence to the contrary. Above all else, we want to know and base our actions on the actual truth of things. That's the only way to move forward. Next up, our challenge of the week. Easy one this week. Let's practice the Marshawn Lynch technique again. Once a day, or however often you want, look yourself in the mirror. I guess the mirror is optional too. But ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be today? And then do what you can to actually be that kind of person all day long. This is another good one for daily reminders in your calendar, so you remember, and journaling to reflect on the effect it has. But this one is fun and helpful and pretty revealing at the same time. So check this out this week, and we will move on to highly recommended. I mentioned a new book last week that maybe was, just okay. It ended up being a little better than that. Still reading it. It's called The Oligarch's Daughter by Joseph Finder. It's always interesting to me to be reminded of the difference in the quality of writing. I don't write fiction, so I don't understand what makes the difference, but it's so clear as a reader that some writers are just better, at least better for me. It's more interesting, it's engaging, it feels more real, it's more resonant and satisfying. This one is not those things. It's on the lesser end of the scale, in my opinion. He does a fairly good job keeping things moving, which is why I'm still reading it. It switches back and forth from the present, where the guy's on the run, to the past that explains why he's on the run. But it's just sort of thin, weak writing, in my opinion. Again, I couldn't do it, so, take it with a grain of salt. But as a reader, there's a real difference. This is not great, but it is good enough to keep going. Still loving Mo on Netflix. Not sure quite as much as season 1 now that I'm in it a ways. He's still super funny. I love him. Love the people in there. Not sure the situation feels as relatable and believable, but still highly recommended, for sure. Also, Better Call Saul. Still loving that so much. I'm especially impressed with that show on their direction and cinematography. I wouldn't normally notice or comment on that, but it plays a big part in setting the tone, making things feel even more gritty and real. It's so good. I'll also mention again that great podcast episode from the Ezra Klein Show. Definitely recommend giving that a listen. I think you really enjoy it. And that is highly recommended in our show for this week. Reminder again to check out our Raise Your Game programs, executive coaching to get your mojo back at work, Sports Academy for athletes to boost their mental game, and our advanced mental game mastery course to get you onto that winner's podium. That's the program I'm doing with the ski racer I mentioned, and it is the real deal. RaiseYourInnerGame.com for that, david11.com for executive coaching. Now is the time, and results are guaranteed. All right, I hope you have a great week. Let me know any questions. Otherwise, keep up the good work, and I'll see you next week.